Welcome to another episode of Chefs and Guests on the Spoon Mob podcast. This week I'm joined by Chef Kaci Goff. She's the executive chef, owner, founder of Wolf and Woman Pop-Up, which is a pop-up restaurant she runs out of San Diego, California. She also has another pop-up that she does in partners with sommelier Taylor Kleb. That's Lucky Cricket Pop-Up. You can find both of those on Instagram at Wolf and Woman Pop-Up, at Lucky Cricket Pop-Up too as well. So check those out. I first got introduced to Kaci through Instagram. San Diego has this budding food scene that's getting ready to explode kind of on the national stage. And it's always been overshadowed by the LA area because it's so close. She's kind of right in the middle of it with her pop-up. I mean, there's a bunch of different sushi restaurants. The Michelin Guide finally started recognizing stuff that's going on down there too as well in San Diego. So she's in the thick of it and she's getting ready to, start working towards opening a brick and mortar spot. Looking for one for her restaurant. She wants it to be in San Diego. And that's going to be an exciting journey to kind of follow along. We go through kind of her career line by line, as I normally do with people, and really get into the pop-up and different challenges she's faced throughout her career, not only because she's a female chef in a male-dominated industry, but she's also not a white chef too as well, because she is Malaysian. That's what she's cooking, is this Malaysian food that looks super delicious. It's kind of in this fine dining style too as well. There's not a whole lot of people that cook Malaysian food, and there's even less that do it in kind of notable markets too as well. I mean, you could find, maybe a spot in Chicago or San Francisco, maybe DC, something like that, but it's few and far between. And she's definitely doing stuff really unique. It's really interesting. And just her whole story is kind of, it's the story that you don't normally get. You get all these profiles of different chefs, especially from the celebrity ones and the famous ones. And they might have a challenge here or two, but I think her story relates to most chefs because she's not at this fame level yet. She hasn't, reached this pinnacle of her career. So she's coming up through it, and it's kind of a slog, and it's going through all these different places, and you work at this place and like they're doing this stuff and they're treating people this way, and you go over here and then there's this issue. And I think that's more common than people realize. So it was really cool for her to come on and share her story. I'm super excited to see kind of where she goes. Super excited to eventually get out to San Diego and try her food for myself. She's actually the first guest that we're having on the podcast that I actually haven't eaten at their restaurant or tried their food in some form, shape, or manner. So we're going to branch out a little bit and have people that have interesting stories and places that we desperately want to eat at on the podcast. If we can get them on, that'll be kind of a new lane. But up till now, it's everybody that's come on the podcast I've been able to experience their food firsthand, which is awesome. But we definitely want to highlight other chefs that are doing cool, unique stuff across the country that maybe we haven't had a chance to eat at yet, but we're going to sometime in the near future. And Kaci and Wolf and Woman Pop-Up is definitely on that list. So check them out on Instagram. She does live up in the mountains, so the audio is a little hit or miss on this one, unfortunately, just some connection issues. We did as much as we could to kind of get to a level that's tolerable, so just bear with it. It was just kind of a connection issue. There wasn't a whole lot that we could do, but we cleaned it up as much as we could. So appreciate everybody. Check out their Instagram. And without further delay, here's my conversation with Chef Kaci Goff, the owner of Wolf and Woman Pop-Up in San Diego, California. Thanks again for taking some time and doing the podcast. I've been fortunate enough so far with the podcast. Everybody I've had on actually have eaten their food firsthand or had some sort of interaction. You're the first guest that is just somebody that I've been following for a while on Instagram, and I just really, really want to come to San Diego and eat your food. It looks amazing. And, did some looking into kind of your background and your story. And it's super interesting too as well. And I was like, I knew eventually I was going to have to start having people on the podcast that maybe haven't eaten at the restaurant yet, but want to. And you're kind of the first in that lane. So, you can put that on your social media if you want to, or... But we'll start, like I do with everybody, starting at the beginning of your career. I mean, take me through it. We'll go in depth here. How did you first get started cooking? Was that something that you always wanted to do? Was that something that you just started doing in high school and kind of fell into?
I guess it was more so, in high school, like throughout childhood and everything, my mom always made home cooked meals. That was kind of just something I grew up with. And in high school, I just, was cooking at home. And then eventually, like senior year came around, everyone was like, well, what are you going to be doing after high school? And everyone said, you should go to culinary school. You like cooking. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Maybe that makes sense, after a recession, going to spend a bunch of money in culinary school you don't have. So I went to culinary school in 2009, got a degree, ended up getting tendonitis in my right hand. that right when I graduated from school and was working, kind of kicked me out of the industry for about a year. I ended up having surgery on my hand, but my left hand ended up getting it because I had to pick up the load for a year just because my right hand could not do anything. So I ended up kind of moving to the front of the house for a little bit throughout the last decade. So I've worked every position in a restaurant from front to back, but, cooking has been where my heart's been at. So, every chance I got, I, try to make my way back to the kitchen. But the last few years, I've been dealing with some arthritis in my hands. So like trying to be aligned is really laborious already. I've been doing Wolf and Woman for about 4 years. That's, what I've been just working on. I was still working full time in a restaurant up until the pandemic, kind of threw everything for a curveball this last year and a half. And I've just been trying to make this work, trying to make something work, kind of figure it out.
So did you start cooking in like high school? Did you ever work at a restaurant, or were you strictly just kind of going to school and then decided after high school to go to culinary school?
Yeah, I was just kind of cooking at home through childhood. Always watched like PBS and the cooking shows, like Two Fat Ladies and all that. And, Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals that I always say, someone kind of gave me some stuff about going. I was like, I think I'm such a good line cook because of watching the Rachel Ray 30-minute meals, because you had to work so fast. And I could kind of put it in my brain on how to make things, do this and do that. And then food was always kind of like a part of my life. And maybe I just didn't know that was a direction I was going to go into. But I mean, health is something that I'm really passionate about and love. So despite how hard this industry has been, it's, definitely where my heart has been.
So you went to the Art Institutes, you got a culinary degree there, and then you were going for, I think, food and beverage management too as well. But I think you wound up not completing that. Looking back on it now, what would you do differently? Would you just not go to culinary school and just work in kitchens?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I tell other people. It's like, kind of look out and see that, inspire you. I would have definitely liked just kind of getting my bearings in the industry, because even with culinary school, you always started at the bottom anyways and had to work your way up. So I kind of wish I just went that route. And that's kind of what I tell, other people getting into the industry, like young people, just find places you want to work and who you want to learn from, and try to seek out mentorship if you can.
When you were going for the food and beverage degree and wound up deciding to just kind of get out of school, what kind of led to that process? Was it just not really getting anything from it, kind of information wise, or what led you to decide to finally kind of take that leap and go like, I'm kind of done with school. I want to get into the real world and start cooking?
Well, I was in the industry towards the end of my associate's program. So I was working in the industry, but it was so much time to dedicate in school and try to have a full-time job. And I had just moved to LA. And so I was like, I can't work full-time and go to school anymore. This is like super hard. And it's just really expensive. I was having a hard time even getting loans, even though, my parents were never really well off. So I could never get grants for some reason, but that's kind of what those schools did to people. So eventually it was just kind of like finances and life decisions that were like this. It just makes more sense that I need to work and hopefully kind of get my foot in the door that way.
Once you kind of got out, you were working at Leonessi Cellars, right? As a pantry cook. That was kind of like your first job outside of culinary school.
Towards the end of culinary school, I was working at a different winery. There was some sexual harassment going on there. And so I was really quick to leave when I could. And then I ended up getting a job at that. And I was there for a little bit, but that's when I ended up getting tendonitis in my wrist.
How did that opportunity come about? Was it just like, did you go and apply?
No, actually, the chef that was running the place and also his sous chef that was helping him out were two instructors at the school. When I was in my graduating restaurant class, my chef instructor was actually his sous chef. And I was telling him I was working at the other winery, and he was just kind of poking fun that I was the enemy. I gave my resume with nothing on it except school and that winery to the chef. And I said I want a job. And then I went into stage and then end up working there.
So after that, you wind up working, I think, as assistant pastry chef at Malibu Pier restaurant and bar, right?
Yeah, that's I was originally going as a host there, and Jason Full Love wanted to put me on. He wanted me to come back into the kitchen and wanted me to do pastry. He said that would probably be the easiest thing for me. That was my first opening, and that was openings are crazy, and my hands, they couldn't keep up still with me. So eventually, I was supposed to be the assistant pastry. I ended up kind of taking over the role because the pastry chef left on us during that opening, and I was like, I have no business being in this position because I'm not a pastry chef. I have no clue what I'm doing. So that was a little crazy.
What was the most difficult part of becoming kind of a pastry chef or taking on that role? Before that, you're always kind of used to working on the line and stuff. And then you take pastry's a whole different thing. And I've talked to a couple people that have done it. They usually said like it was just the shift change, like the hours, having to get up super early in the morning to get to the restaurant and start prepping and doing all the pastry stuff or being there late at night and stuff like that. But what was the most difficult challenge with that transition for you?
The most difficult thing was more like I had just moved to LA and I was on my own for the first time, wasn't used to LA traffic. So, like, I wasn't, had to get up early in the mornings to get to the job in Malibu at 7 in the morning. And I get stuck in traffic for like 2 hours trying to get to the Pacific Coast Highway. And it was a nightmare. And then when we first were opening, they were doing some movie shoot into the parking lot. So we couldn't park in like the only parking lot off of Pacific Coast Highway. So I had to teach myself how to parallel park while cars are zooming past you. And it was so hectic. Trying to learn pastry is like a different ballpark. It definitely is, so precise. It's something I struggle with till this day. Like it's just not my area.
Did you never have to take like a parallel parking for the driver's exam?
No, I grew up in a suburban town. So our parallel parking was pulling up to this sidewalk, and that was it. It wasn't parallel parking. So I was trying not to die. So I can parallel park well.
Yeah, they had these like cones set up that they were supposed to be like the size of like a parking space or a car. And then you would drive into it and they'd tell you left or right. And then you would have to like back out of this like little maze thing that they set up. At least here in Ohio, like, I don't know if it's still the same because this was like 15, like 17 years ago. But if you hit a cone, it was like an automatic fail. And then you'd have to come back and like do it again like a week later or something like that. But then after that, when you're doing the pastry chef stuff, and then you wind up going to Knead and Co. was next, right? Focus on pasta making.
Yeah, I was at Union, their sister restaurant. I was hosting at the Wallace in Culver City, but I also ended up taking on the job at Union. So I was working two different places at that time. From morning until night. And those hours were really crazy because the pasta production team had to get there. I got there at 6 in the morning and I lived in Culver City, and that was in Pasadena, completely on the other side of the city. Get there and get your doughs made. You're going to be sheeting doughs that morning. And that restaurant was like, it's in like Old Town Pasadena. And there was like a basement that used to be a former speakeasy back in like Prohibition times. And it was just like this long, dark corridor that was so creepy. And when I had to be like the first one that showed up there, I usually like avoided for an hour to go down there if I could. But that one was a crazy one because then we end up going to the opening for Knead and Company because like the different locations, we kind of learn like, with like dough making and stuff like that. A lot of like your terroir, like your environment goes into like the dough. So if like it's really humid that day, you're not going to need as much water to like hydrate it. So there was one time in the opening when all of our recipes, were made for Union. And when we use them into the Knead space, I think it probably was like 40 pounds of dough that were just not right. And we couldn't figure out why at the time. And then also our flour mill was like milling their durum a little bit differently too. So we end up having to like throw away like 40 pounds of dough. And it was like really horrific and catastrophic. And it was pretty awful. But that was a little crazy. That opening was probably one of the hardest and most traumatic openings I've gone through.
What made it so difficult?
I guess like the culture of it just wasn't like a nice environment to work in. It was really toxic and you were overworked a lot and just not appreciated.
Looking back from this point kind of through your career, like, were you real calculated with the places that you were going? You did some pastry, worked on a line before that. You were focused on pasta making. It feels like you're kind of, and I don't know if this was intentional or if it was just these were the jobs that were coming up that were interesting to you at the time or jobs that you were able to get. But it seems like you're almost compiling all these little skill sets along the way. Was that something that you were intentionally doing, or is just something that kind of happened?
Yeah, it was definitely, I wanted to learn as much as I could in this industry. So I tried to just take any opportunity to, learn at really great places was like, that's been my intention the whole time is to just not like have a job. I always wanted to be like fulfilling for my career and for myself. I was hired to go into Evan Funky's opening for Felix to do pasta again, and things didn't work out at that time. And then that's when I shot off to Seattle. I'm done with LA.
What took you to Seattle? How did you wind up going up there?
I was just like, I'm done with LA. I'm done with California. Let me go check somewhere else out. And I was kind of bouncing between Seattle or Austin. I definitely wanted to I just wanted to kind of get out of also just like the partiness that this industry can, have. And I ended up getting a job in Seattle. And then it was a little crazy. Seattle, they party too much. I wish I never went there.
With the LA food scene, is it super competitive? Is it, a new restaurant kind of gets announced that it's going to open and like just everybody kind of floods to that restaurant to apply? Or like, is it just kind of like every other city where, you're constantly kind of working your connections to see like what's new, would I want to work there, kind of all that stuff?
It's definitely competitive. So when you're kind of trying to get your name out there or like wanting to work somewhere really great, there's definitely a lot of other people, shooting for that spot. And then if trying to make your own name, it's hard. It's kind of like it can be really cliquey in that industry. So there's like that about it. And then it's just, there is a lot going on. And there was like a huge kind of like culture shock when I had went to Seattle, because I was so used to LA openings. There were people, months on end, hours in line wanting to like come eat there, come to this place. And it was so anticipated. And then going to Seattle where like it wasn't like that. Like I was in one opening that was just like, no one was there. And like there was like bartenders that couldn't make their rent because they weren't making money. And I was like, this is nuts. Like LA, people are going wild for like a new spot in the neighborhood.
So when you finally get up to Seattle, what was the biggest difference between cooking in LA and cooking in Seattle, aside from, not having, I guess, people show out for new restaurants and stuff like that? But was there anything different in terms of style or ingredients or anything like that, comparing the two?
The ingredients are just really beautiful up there. I mean, because there's just so much greenery. The style, I guess like you're kind of going to get more of like the new American feel in cuisine. So kind of a big influence of, the different cultures of people that, maybe live in the area. And then utilizing a lot of local ingredients is pretty big up there. There's just little things that were different that I noticed was that they cooked with carbon pans, like for everything, and not just like saute pans. That was like a unique thing about Seattle. But yeah, I think those things it wasn't much different, like with California kind of using, their local ingredients and everything, because it's really big here with like just, we have so many great farms in this state and especially in Southern California.
How did you like the weather in Seattle compared to LA?
Very big difference. So when everyone asked like, oh, why would you leave California? Like there's sunshine there. I was like, I've had enough sun. And then I made it 2 years in Seattle, and definitely not having the sunshine, it does take its toll on your health. But the summers, I will say, are the most incredible things ever. It's so beautiful there, like out on the water and have a good time. It's so lovely during summer for 3 months.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. The one time that I've been able to visit Seattle so far, it was in July, which everybody there is like, oh yeah, July, August, and September are like the 3 months that you can come here. The rest of the year is kind of like, it's going to be rainy or cold or cloudy or whatever.
Yeah, it's not like rainy. It like drizzles most of the time and it's just so gloomy. It compared to like maybe like 20 years ago when California used to get storms and rain here. It like pours rain here. And I know this girl I just met recently that's from Seattle and she experienced like an actual rainstorm here. And she's like, oh my God, we don't get this in Seattle. I'm like, this isn't even rain in California. We're in a drought again.
And then you went to Mono Fried Chicken and Whiskey, which was a Hawaiian restaurant. Was that kind of the first time that you got close to kind of cooking the style of food that you wanted to, with Hawaiian being closer to Malaysian cuisine than really, French is?
That place was definitely had like some Asian fusion in there. So the chef that was was running the place is just like super talented, had like a Michelin background. But the food we were doing there was very humble, fried chicken, of course. But everything was just so incredible. We did do a lot of fun things like, chili crab pasta. We used a lot of like Asian ingredients like gailon and things like that. That place was the busiest place in Seattle I worked, and it cranked out food. I had so much fried chicken. I guess that was definitely a little closer to what I'm doing now. Like most of my career, I guess I didn't know what direction I was going to go in. I knew I wanted to learn a lot of different techniques, and I wanted to be very open to learning, different styles of cuisine. It wasn't, until a few years ago when I realized like I'm not as familiar with my own heritage. And that's kind of when I started exploring that. And that's kind of where I'm at with where my food is at now.
Yeah, because you started your pop-up December 2017, Wolf and Woman. What made you want to do a pop-up?
Definitely have been tired working for people. I've never had much kind of like given to me in my career when it's come to like learning and opportunities. And so, this was never a job for me. I was always something more, just like wanting to be a little more creative and just going into that direction. I had been trying to kind of get a pop-up going in 2014, and I kind of did a couple little things there. And then when I was in Seattle, I made friends with like a lot of really talented chefs up there. And then one of them, him and I could just talk about food all day and like come up with like the coolest like dishes and menus. And so one day I was like, this is what I'm going to do. Do you want to do this with me? And so we initially did that together, but things didn't work out business wise. So it ended up, it's been me, and we kind of parted ways on that. But I've just been, the end goal has always hoping for a brick and mortar out of this, and, hoping I catch someone's eye that believes and wants to invest in what I'm doing. So that's kind of been the road I'm on. And, the pandemic's really crazy, like working through that and trying to figure out where this has all been. Because I launched in San Diego, and it's been really surreal that there's any recognition or people like wondering, oh, what's going on over there? And it's a little overwhelming because I'm like, wait, no, I'm not ready.
Yeah, I mean, you popped up in San Diego. What made you kind of want to move back? Because originally when you started your pop-up, you were doing kind of like new American cuisine, like Pacific Northwest ingredients. And then eventually you switched to really your heritage, which is Malaysian. And you started cooking Malaysian Tamil cuisine. So like, what made you want to make that switch? Like, how did you come to terms with that?
I think like always that missing puzzle piece in my like food. And, just asking myself a question, like, because, you want to put yourself into the things that you're doing and like put your heart into it. And, when I was looking at what I'm doing, I'm like, this isn't me. There's something that's just not there. And then that's kind of when I asked myself, I was like, wait, like, I don't really know my heritage that well. There's things like I've grown up with and my mom has, cooked throughout my childhood. But a lot of this stuff now, it's just like things that she's grown up with too that I never even had.
Where's the name come from? How'd you come up with the name?
Yeah, it's a poem by Nikita Gill. And some days I'm more than woman, and I'm still learning how to stop apologizing for my wild.
What made you kind of decide to leave Seattle? I mean, obviously the weather was a big component, but you could have gone anywhere and you went kind of back to California. It was just because your family's there?
I wasn't like my mental health wasn't doing so well at this point. And I was just like, I need to come back. I don't have like any support system here at all. And, so I came back to LA, and I was there for a little bit, and then had a family member pass away, and then got out of a really bad relationship. So that's when I was like, okay, I need to move back home for a little. And shortly after, the pandemic hit, and then, everyone's world got flipped upside down.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of moved your pop-up and everything like it was like 2019. Then the pandemic starts at the beginning of 2020. What did you do during the pandemic? Because, I mean, a lot of the restaurants were closed. LA and, most of California was on a lockdown for extended period of time, more so than some other states. How did you kind of fill the time? Were you just kind of working on Wolf and Woman branding and website and stuff like that? Or what'd you do?
No, everything was a standstill. There was just like really nothing to do. When last fall came around, when things were kind of like, maybe loosening up a little bit, I tried getting some meal kits going, and those weren't too successful, nothing to really live on. And then, once the new year came around this year, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't even know if I have a career left. Like, is it time to kind of, throw in the towel and, pick a different job, pick a different industry? Is that even possible right now? Like, how do you even start over when there's, over 10 years of an investment into something that you've been working on? And then I reached out and did a dinner for Women's History Month with one of the cider works in San Diego. And then it was just snowballed after that. And it's just kind of been, momentum has just been going and going and going.
Now, you don't live in San Diego, right? Like, you commute to San Diego. Is that correct?
I commute. I live a little 2 hours north up in the mountains.
Because, yeah, I remember from your Instagram, I think you posted like you've been in like 2 car accidents, I think, this year so far.
Yeah, I was in one last year. And then 2 months ago, I was turning into the venue for a farm dinner. I was doing a 2-day farm dinner, and I was turning into the venue, and it was just a stupid turn, and I got T-boned, and like everything that I've like invested into the last 4 years was in my car. But I mean, I'm okay. I got hit in the head. The only thing I couldn't fit into the coolers was frozen watermelon sorbet, and that hit me so hard in the head when I got hit, and I was covered in sorbet. And then everything was just broken and destroyed. So been trying to bounce back from that one.
You're doing all these pop-ups. How do you find these different locations? Is it just constant like networking, like reaching out to people like, hey, would you guys be interested in hosting a pop-up at your facility or whatever? Or do people reach out to you or like, hey, we're not normally open on Mondays. Do you want to come and do a pop-up here? Like, how does that all kind of work?
It's mostly been like constant networking on my end, just seeing, who would be really cool to collaborate with. A lot of it has been with like beverage people. And then, I've had maybe, I think, just for the dinner in December that's coming up, I had one of the PR firms in San Diego say that the resort was looking for another chef to add on to their guest chef series. And the woman who runs the PR firm is just so nice, and she kind of like throws out little opportunity things that she hears of for me. So that's kind of like the first thing that I've been invited to, I think, so far. So it's kind of finally a lot of like the work on my end is paying off, that some people are interested in and wanting to business with.
That's awesome to hear that it's finally kind of snowballing for you. You did a pop-up in Austin. Are you open to doing pop-ups like in different cities too as well that you can do? Or how'd you kind of decide on doing that?
I've been, trying to kind of like get my, my name out there and everything that I'm doing. And since I like don't have a brick and mortar, it's like, it's fun to be able to like maybe go work with some other people, especially, people like foreign and domestic who are, very respected in Austin, and, just like people that you look up to in the industry, they like when you've been coming up, and to like have opportunity to like work with them and be hosted by them is really cool. And then I can, kind of see what's going on in other places and kind of like build my name like that, build a network of more people.
How do you differentiate like menus for all the different, because you do a lot of pop-ups. I think normally like a pop-up restaurant, they're like, oh yeah, they kind of find a space that's fairly consistent and like they do, one or two dinners a week, right? But you're you're hustling, you're bouncing all over the place, doing all sorts of different dinners, like I said, Austin. I mean, you're in all these different wineries and stuff. Just any opportunity that you can to cook, it seems, which is definitely the way you have to go about it. How do you differentiate all the menus? Do you kind of get a feel for like the space first and that kind of helps with creativity? Or is it who you're working with that you're kind of trying to vibe off of? Or how do you determine, what you're going to cook?
If I am collaborating with someone, it is kind of like the vibe of like what they're bringing. I definitely take into consideration like the location and like the type of demographics that are already coming there, and I try to make the menu like that makes sense for the people that are already maybe coming to those establishments. So sometimes maybe it's not being so adventurous or crazy with ingredients or like certain things, try to make them a little more familiar for people. That's usually how I kind of like drive things. And also just, the seasons and everything and what's available from, the farms and the fisheries and everyone that's providing some really great products for people.
So you're constantly like kind of on your toes almost, right? With creating a menu, then it's really dependent upon like 5 or 6 different things.
I try to keep things as like, if a menu's released, I try to keep like, that's what it's going to be. But sometimes maybe the fish changes because they didn't catch it that day. Or, like we had a cold front move in like right before summer. So a lot of the summer crops were set back like a month and a half. So what I had corn on the menu wasn't going to be on the menu because I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't want to go to the grocery store and like get that because not what I try to be about.
I mean, you also started another kind of pop-up too, right? Lucky Cricket with sommelier Taylor Burke. I mean, you guys just did a dinner last night, I think, right?
Yes, we did. Yes, that's so exciting. She's been working with Brian Miller's restaurant group for 7 years. And she's a chef as well, but she moved into the wine side over the last few years. And so she's kind of taken over there as a wine director for them. And she reached out to me a few months ago and was interested if I collaborate with sommeliers, and I told her, yeah, of course, like I definitely want to collaborate with as many people as I can, especially people on the wine side, because I know what wines I like, but I don't know wine like that. What was originally supposed to be like a 15-person dinner in her backyard, and we were gonna do like really adventurous ingredients like offal and stuff, and then it ended up turning into like a huge kind of like warehouse dinner and like an actual seated dinner. And it's a bigger thing than we both had even thought it's gonna turn into.
You just had that many people that wanted tickets to it? Was that what happened?
No, we ended up, we weren't able to host it in her backyard anymore. And so we were kind of still looking for an intimate spot. So we were reaching out to some other people that had some spaces. And eventually we came into the warehouse space, and it was really big. And I was like, well, maybe we should just do something that's a little bit larger. And then so we're like, okay. And we decided that we'd, do a larger dinner. And then eventually I kind of made the call that we'd socially distance people again, because we were going to do like a communal dinner, but, Delta was going crazy. So we ended up like socially distancing the tables, and kind of, it just kind of filled the space a little bit more. And it was more of, I guess, like a vibe that like I always envisioned Wolf and Woman would be, just kind of like having that feel of things, like, bringing that Southeast Asian like night market, but like a lot of culture and like city and artwork that I've like always wanted. And that's been really cool. So it's like transformed into something bigger and a lot more incredible.
Do you do most of the prep at your house and then just like bring all the stuff with you? Or do you do any like prep? You basically try and limit as much as you have to do on site, right?
Um, so if I'm like doing with other restaurants, of course, for like prepping in their space, I have a commissary because I this year got fully licensed and I'm not like super underground anymore. But like some things they still kind of they get either prepped here or they'll be at like the commissary just to keep things in compliance.
What's the biggest difference between Wolf and Woman and Lucky Cricket?
I think it's just like the character of it all, because of course it's Taylor, her vision is involved in it as well, and then Wolf and Women brings the food and everything, and then the space and how we like transform it and the way it looks is definitely very collaborative. It's definitely like a bigger thing than like me and Wolf and Women and everything, if that makes sense.
I totally get what you're saying. Like, it's not just there's more people, that are coming to the dinners or anything like that, or that you guys can do bigger stuff, but there's a wine component too. And it's really like just a bigger pop-up essentially.
Yeah, it's definitely an extension off of Wolf and Woman that's just been, taken to another level. And just like that, the vibe and kind of what we're bringing is just unique in its own.
Do you think you'll be able to expand both simultaneously, or are both going to be like different ends of the same kind of goal for you, which is kind of eventually brick and mortar?
I think Lucky Cricket will most likely stay as a project for both Taylor and I, just with where we're at in our careers. I think Wolf and Woman will be the one that will eventually branch into a brick and mortar if I'm lucky. But, we'll see. I think like everyone is just trying to like stay optimistic and positive and focused and consistent. But it's like, it's hard with everything going on still, like to try to keep going.
We mentioned the car accidents earlier, but I mean, you travel a couple hours to do your pop-ups in San Diego. Broken plates have been shipped to you. I mean, I saw that Instagram post. You helped publish a recipe book, I think a couple years ago, back in 2018. I think you're working on a memoir too as well. Like, you're one of the busiest people, like, at least from what I can tell from Instagram and all the different pop-ups that you're doing across Lucky Cricket, Wolf and Woman and everything. How do you kind of keep it all straight? How do you keep going and keep pushing? Because it just seems like you're doing so much, like, all over the place, but it all looks amazing.
I don't know. I think that's a lot of like pep talking, like that inner monologue that is like, I think we can all be like our harshest critics. And sometimes one of the biggest things I've been trying to do lately is to stay present and to be like, I'm like, this is where I've worked hard to be. And I need to like cut myself some slack because, I'm actually doing a lot. And, it is all me like doing it. And I have to give myself some credit to that.
Going through everything that you have within the culinary industry, all the different restaurants and harassment and verbal, physical abuse, like a whole bunch of people have taken on and undertook different places that they've worked, mental, emotional abuse, like all that stuff. Has it all been worth it looking back on it so far?
I don't know. I'm really bitter about my career, if I'm honest with you. There's a lot of like pain and trauma that comes from the last decade. I guess the way I'm trying to like harness that is to just, definitely speak out against it and, hope to be part of the change in, these upcoming years when the industry is building itself to just be better for everyone and just be healthier and be a place that people want, that can thrive and want to be here, and that the people that love doing what they do, that it's not going to come at a cost of their mental health or their physical health or even at the loss of their careers. That people can be here because they love it and they can be creative, and there's opportunity and there's growth here, and there's also not all bad people. Hopefully all the bad people stop being bad or just go away.
The West Coast, is definitely more progressive than, where I live in middle America. Do you think Malaysian food, the stuff that you're cooking could work in bigger cities across kind of like the US or even to the Midwest, like outside of Chicago?
I definitely think so. I think, there's always like some small towns you'll run into that has like that one Thai food place or that one place. And I definitely think there's, a place for it.
Is California where you want to be, like where you eventually want to open up your own restaurant, or are you open to like other locations? Like obviously you've been to Austin, you did your pop up there, so you got to kind of check out that city. You've lived in Seattle, so that's probably not somewhere that you want to open your own restaurant based on what you went through and everything. But is it for sure going to be California because that's like where your family is, or are you still kind of open to just whatever kind of comes your way?
I mean, I'm not a closed door on it. I am open, but like definitely at this point in my life, being closer to family, I think San Diego's what I'm going to be working towards. My plan is to be, I think there's a lot of potential going on in San Diego right now. I don't think they've been like as recognized as they could or should have been for like the food down there. And I think there's just a lot of exciting things going on right now. I think in the next few years, it's going to be kind of on the map, like LA is.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's just starting to kind of blow up and get some national recognition here and there, where before it was definitely overshadowed by LA because they're so close. It's only it's like an hour between the two if you hit traffic right.
It's a little more depend on, I guess, which way you're going. It could be about 2 hours, maybe. I'm in between it, and it would take me about 3 hours to get to LA just because the freeways are awful.
The metro system doesn't run all the way down there, right?
If on the coast it does, but if you're coming inland, the train comes like into one of the counties over here, and then you'd be kind of switching a couple buses, and then it's not that great.
So yeah, I mean, like a lot of chefs have done kind of the pop-up model or switch to it. The private catering has become kind of a big thing where, chefs will come into your home and cook you a fantastic dinner and everything. A lot of that, I think, is because of the pandemic. People kind of shifted what they were doing with, restaurants closing or them getting laid off and everything. Do you think more chefs will kind of continue towards that model instead of the traditional brick and mortar route?
I'm thinking so. I'm thinking a lot of like everyone's been talking about ghost kitchens as well. I think the industry has been also talking about like just doing like that quick service type of concept that's, makes a lot more sense because, you don't make much money when you're doing really, nice sit down food to like, meet your margins and pay everything you need to pay when you're doing something on that level. I think, and especially with the pandemic and, there's going to be so much that like needs to be done to like recover that I think it's going to be more in that direction of like pop-ups and like quick service type of things and like those concepts that are just going to make a little more sense.
You also sell masala through your website too, right?
Yes, I've been working on a little masala line, been working on some condiments and stuff. I've, kind of been lagging on that, but a lot of those are, South Indian inspired, a little, American inspired as well.
So do you plan on expanding kind of on the packaged goods, things that you can kind of ship to people if they're interested?
Yeah, I want to. I want there to be like a full line that could be sold, like like the little boutique stores down here and stuff that people are really interested in. Because I think that's definitely gonna, if I can get that out there and brand it properly, it will hopefully carry me through some of the times when the pop up's not able to be done.
This next question comes from Chef Matthew Hagens. He's a chef owner here in Columbus. He's a previous guest on the podcast. He owns Preston's, a burger joint here. He left behind a question. What way do you feel like you can be a better citizen in the hospitality industry going forward?
Just being a good person. I've always, I've worked for some places that were really hard to work for, and I knew that I didn't want to be that kind of employer or just that kind of person. And I think it's really important to just be kind to the people that are you or that you do business with and that are around you, and just have those kind of leadership skills. I think those are important. It's not less ego and more heart.
What's a question you want to leave behind for the next guest on the podcast?
Oh wow. Okay. Where do they think the industry will be headed towards in like the next 2 years?
So I got a handful of more questions for you. These are the ones that we ask to everybody who comes on the podcast. So there's a compare and contrast. First question for you. Who was the biggest influence on your career thus far, your culinary career?
I guess that would be my mom, because that's why I'm cooking.
What's the one kitchen item that's not a knife that you can't live without?
I guess plating spoons.
What's one thing in a restaurant that you would not fix yourself? Now, I know you're doing a pop-up, so you kind of have to fix most everything. But when you were working in a restaurant, if something would break, what was the one thing that you weren't going to try and fix yourself?
Anything that had to do with the grease trap.
What's one restaurant in San Diego that you'd recommend that isn't your own?
Oh, man, there's a lot down here. I recently had dinner at Hoxton Manor that just opened up. They're doing like Vietnamese, Southeast Asian, like influenced cuisine. The chef is, he has a background in that kind of like Malaysian, Southeast Asian food too. He formerly has come from Dominique Kren's place too. And so he's like running the menu over there. And that place was really, really good to eat at. So I definitely have been recommending it to people.
Bucket list travel destination, bucket list restaurant. Is there a place that you definitely want to go to whenever you get a chance to travel? What's one place that you want to eat at that you haven't been able to yet?
I really want to go to Malaysia and go to a restaurant called Candlenut. I think they have 1 Michelin, and they're doing Peranakan cuisine, which is a specific kind of like regional cuisine in Malaysia. So that would be really interesting to see, like, food that I am doing represented on like that level. Place I want to travel to. I've really been wanting to go to Valle de Guadalupe. It's like a wine country in Baja California. And it looks like it's, there's a lot of chefs doing things down there right now too. And it just looks really beautiful.
Yeah. And I think Candlenut, they have 2 restaurants. They have one in Singapore, and then they have another one in Malaysia. I think it's in the capital city in Malaysia. Because the one in Singapore, I think it might be 2 Michelin starred now. I don't remember off the top of my head. But craziest thing you've seen happen in a restaurant while you're working?
So there's this one story that I feel so bad if John ever hears this and knows that I'm still telling this story till this day. But years ago, this was when I was at Mono. John, he was our pantry cook, and he was pretty green. This was like his second place. I think his first time on like a line, and the rest of us were all women on the line. And we kind of like hooked a lot of fun and like gave him, a lot of tough love, because he was younger too. He was the youngest out of all of us. He was 19. So even though I was the one that gave him like the hardest time, I was always there to help him with everything. So like if he like messed something up, I'd help him fix it, or help him hide it and not get in trouble. And so he always asked me to help. And this pantry station was like the smallest pantry station I've ever, in a restaurant I've worked. So he had to do a lot of little side duties for us, like scrub the burners for us. And he had to purge the chicken, and it be in this huge giant container. And so the dishwasher would help him pour it out, and he had to take care of the chicken that was going to be turned into fried chicken for us. And then this one service where he had just got out of his push. And so, all the main dinner courses were coming in for me. And all of a sudden, I hear him in the most distressed call, scream my name. And he's just like, Kaci, help me. And I look over, and he's swinging a mop around, not using it properly. That kitchen is completely flooded, 10 by 10 flooded. And I just burst into laughter, and I run over. I take the mop away from him. I look at the drain catcher, and for some reason, it's probably to the brim. 10 pounds of rice was filled in there for some reason. The other cook was washing rice and then didn't clean up, so the water didn't go through, and it flooded the kitchen. And so I'm just like, I'm dying at this point. And I run to the dish pit because it's like going into the service station. And I don't want anyone to slip and fall. And I go to grab the squeegee that's hanging up in the pipes. And when I grab it, only the stick comes off and the squeegee's hanging up there still. So I'm almost crying because I'm laughing so hard. I grabbed the hand squeegee from the dishwasher, and this thing is so beat up, you have to like hold it together. And then I run back, and then I start squeegeeing as fast as I can. And like John is standing there completely mortified, and I'm laughing so hard. The CDC, my chef Alicia, she wasn't laughing at all. She was not happy. And so she has to go and start clearing my tickets, and I'm squeegeeing as fast as I can to get the water under control. And it probably took me about like 15 or 20 minutes because it was so flooded. I go and open the walk-in, and then that was flooded too. And I was like, how much like water like did not go down this drain? And it's so funny. And that was maybe not like the worst thing I've ever seen, but that was probably the funniest thing that like I just still remember that like it was yesterday.
Food or drink guilty pleasure? I know you don't drink, but is there a food guilty pleasure that just something that like even if you're going up and down the aisles of the grocery store, you're like, I kind of got to stay away from that aisle. Like this is down there, and I know if I go down there, I'm going to buy it, kind of thing.
Guilty pleasure. I don't know that one. I don't think I mean, chips, I guess. Like I'll just eat chips all day. So I usually like don't get them that often, or I try to get myself to get, like the healthy ones that are like the rice cake ones or whatever that are like healthy. So it's not like bad.
Is there a kind of chips, flavor or brand?
Usually like Kettle. The Kettle ones are like the jalapeno or like salt and vinegar.
Favorite dish, kind of thing you've ever cooked, created, when like looking back on your career, you can kind of point to like that moment that you're like, yes, I for sure can do this professionally as a chef. That first time that like you were really, really happy with something that you cooked, created, kind of your aha moment.
Have to be, I think a lot of like lately, I've like had the aha moments in what I'm doing, but also a lot of like, like there's so much I'm like still learning, and there's still like there's little things of like just that, just that I'm pushing and doing all these things, and they're really ambitious and creative is just I don't know. I guess that's just what it is. I don't know if there's like one specific dish because there's just so much going on.
Do you have like a favorite dish that you cook whenever you can like incorporate it on the menu, put it on there kind of thing?
The one thing that's been pretty consistent has been rasam. It's a South Indian tamarind soup. And that one's it's just so comforting for me because it's something like my mom makes. So it's been something that I've like wanted to share with everyone else. And so that one's been very consistent. And then I've kind of played around with like the makeup of that and kind of making it a little more contemporary, like putting like different things in it, not just having the rasam. So that's been fun to play around with as well, but then also share something that's very like dear to me.
I'm an Anthony Bourdain fan, but not everybody is. If you were, was there a favorite moment, episode, scene that always stands out to you about him? Or if you weren't, is there another kind of culinary personality, whether it's like an Emerald or a Julia Child or somebody that you always kind of gravitated towards?
Definitely an Anthony Bourdain fan, and it was very tragic the day he passed, I think, for everyone in the industry. I think just him being so outspoken, and he didn't, filter what he felt in his heart, but then also was just like, very compassionate and very like eager to kind of learn things that he was maybe unfamiliar with in like other cultures. And just like the way his story writing was just really, beautiful.
Where can people find you? Social media, website, reservations, plug all your stuff.
I am at Wolf and Woman Pop-Up on Instagram. The website is wolfandwomanrestaurant.com. And there's some things for reservations, little things on the website that people can check out.
And then you're also Lucky Cricket Pop-Up on Instagram too, but you guys are not doing any more dinners for the rest of the year for that, right?
Yeah, I think we're having like just a weird wave of like after summer, Delta going into winter that people just, they're not really looking for events right now. So I think we're going to just kind of do something simple for like Halloween and then like a little like market for November and then kind of circle back around in spring. And that's probably what I'm doing with Wolf and Woman as well. Just trying to finish off some of these end of the year dinners and then come back in spring.
We'll probably see you hopefully in the spring then when you kind of start everything back up. I don't know if we'd be able to make it out to San Diego in time for anything in like December or not, but I was looking at flights to San Diego the other day, so who knows? And I'm sure once my wife listens to this, she'll probably do two things. Ask me when we're going to San Diego to eat your Malaysian food, and then also probably order masala off your website, if I had to guess. Those two things will probably happen. So hopefully we'll be able to get out there sooner than later and see you and enjoy your food. It looks awesome. I can't even remember how I found you on Instagram. It's always just enjoyable for me to see like new stuff that you're posting, new pictures and everything, and everything that you have going on. So I really hope that you're able to eventually get into a brick and mortar like you want to, but the pop-up is an awesome thing, you know, from what I've seen, and it looks amazing and looks delicious. So I can't wait to try it myself.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for the support.
Absolutely. But stay in touch. If you ever want to come back on the podcast, have something else to plug or anything like that, open invitation to everyone that comes on. We try and support everybody that comes on as much as possible. So even if it's for like 15 minutes because you have a new pop-up or something like that, or something new on the website or whatever, more than happy to have you back on anytime. Anything you need from me, let me know, but stay in touch and we'll hopefully see you soon.
I will. Thank you.
A big thanks again to Chef Kaci Goff for coming on the podcast, taking some time out of one of her days off in between planning pop-ups and creating menus for different events that she's doing. Sounds like she's going to take a little break here, probably just during the holidays, and then ramp it back up to doing a bunch of pop-ups in the beginning of the new year. So make sure to follow them on Instagram at Wolf and Woman Pop-Up and at Lucky Cricket Pop-Up. That way, any new events, anything that's coming out, you're kind of going to be the first to know as long as you're following along with the account. Make sure to follow us on Instagram too as well at Spoon Mob, Twitter, Facebook, Spoon Mob 1, website, spoonmob.com. Make sure to check out Wolf and Woman Restaurant.com for any details on future pop-ups. Also, you can order some items that she has for sale. Chef Goff does on website. She'll ship them to you. So check all that stuff out if you're interested. Appreciate everybody listening. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. We also have some episodes up on YouTube. Backlog is being remastered all the way up until, I think, Greg Stokes' episode was the first one that Andrew actually did. I did all the ones previously. So Andrew's going back, kind of cleaning those up a little bit. So we're all the way up to Alex Seidel is on YouTube. There's no video component, just audio. But if you want to go back through the backlog, check those out. They're on YouTube as well. You can subscribe to our YouTube page as well. Appreciate everybody listening. Check all of the socials out and all that stuff. But otherwise, we'll talk to you guys next week.